I remember that family meeting like it was yesterday, though it has haunted me in ways I never expected. I walked in trying to appear cheerful, trying to ignore the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. My father, always the loudest in the room, had that smirk on his face, the one that meant he thought he was in control of everything. He laughed when I said, "I can't wait for our vacation." Like my excitement was a joke. Like I had no right to be happy or hopeful. I kept my smile, but inside I was already plotting. That laugh was the fuel I needed. For years, my family had treated me like I was expendable. My accomplishments were always minimized, my voice overlooked, my presence tolerated at best. My siblings had a way of stepping over me without ever looking back, and my parents? They always believed that favoritism would keep the family in line. But that day, I realized I had learned enough to turn the tables. The days leading up to that so-called vacation were full of subtle maneuvering. I let my father believe I was naive, eager, and excited. I let my sister think I was still the compliant one, ready to be sidelined. Meanwhile, I quietly arranged my own version of control. Every hotel booked under my name, every activity planned with precision, and a small legal tweak that meant I had access to all the reservations, accounts, and contacts. No one knew how much I had learned from years of being underestimated. The first night at the resort was the turning point. My father tried his usual dominance, barking out instructions, assuming I would fall in line. I smiled politely, nodded, but secretly. Every single booking, every itinerary, every little detail was being executed exactly as I wanted. When the first minor issue arose, double-booked rooms, a lost reservation, I handled it before anyone else even realized there was a problem. My father's smirk faltered just slightly. He tried to mask it with a laugh, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. By the second day, my sister was already growing frustrated. She had always been the one who thrived on control, organizing events, making plans, dictating who got attention. But she could not see me behind the curtain. I let my children shine, subtly orchestrating moments that put them in positions of leadership among the cousins and other kids. The adults noticed, my siblings noticed, and I kept my composure, letting the recognition trickle in naturally. Midway through the vacation, I introduced what I call the pivotal moment, the family challenge. I proposed a group activity that required cooperation, strategy, and leadership. My father immediately jumped in, expecting to dominate, to assert authority. My sister followed, smug and confident. I watched them for a moment, gauging their weaknesses, their blind spots. Then I stepped forward, gently guiding the activity, letting my children and the cousins naturally take cues from me. The result was stunning. My family, used to my silence and compliance, began to see me differently. The adults deferred to my suggestions. And even my father had to admit, without saying it aloud, that I had orchestrated success where they had expected chaos. My sister tried to regain control, but each attempt only highlighted her frustration and my quiet command of the situation. By the end of that activity, my father was pale, my sister's jaw clenched, and my mother, always the quiet observer, was smiling in a way that said, "Finally you see it." But the real revenge, the part I had been building toward for years, came later that night. During dinner, my father attempted his usual criticism, pointing out minor flaws in how the children were behaving or how I had arranged the table. I listened politely, nodding. And then I asked a simple question. "Would you like me to show you a better way?" The room went silent. My father blinked, my sister froze, and my mother's smile grew. I calmly rearranged the seating, demonstrating a subtle but more effective method. And everyone followed without question. That night, for the first time in decades, I felt the balance shift. Over the next few days, I continued my quiet domination. Every small issue, transportation mix-ups, activity schedules, meal plans, I managed efficiently. My father's attempts at control became increasingly desperate, but I had anticipated each move. My sister tried to undermine me subtly, making sarcastic comments or questioning decisions, but I had prepared for every scenario. By the time the vacation ended, my family could not ignore the reality. I had orchestrated the entire trip, ensured the success of every event, and earned the respect they had long denied me. Returning home, the dynamic remained. My father, who had always been dismissive, began asking for my advice on family matters. My sister, who had thrived on dominance, now deferred to my suggestions in group settings, often without realizing she had done so. My mother, quietly supportive, continued to acknowledge the change with subtle encouragement. It was not just about revenge anymore. It was about establishing authority, reclaiming dignity, and demonstrating that competence and strategy could not be overlooked. Months passed, and the ripple effect continued. Family gatherings, once arenas of judgment and marginalization, became stages where I quietly held influence. My children thrived. My siblings and parents acknowledged our presence without openly admitting it, and I maintained the delicate balance of visibility and restraint. The most important lesson I realized was that revenge is most effective when it is invisible, cumulative, and undeniable through results rather than confrontation. I often think back to that first moment, when my father laughed at my excitement for the vacation. At the time, it stung and I wanted to lash out to prove myself immediately. But I had learned patience, strategy, and the power of preparation. I let the laughter fuel me, let the underestimation become my greatest advantage. Every reservation, every itinerary, every orchestrated moment was a silent statement. We are no longer to be dismissed, ignored, or undervalued. In the years that followed, the shift solidified. My father now listens before speaking, weighing his words. My sister, still sharp and confident, respects the boundaries I have quietly established. My mother continues to support, subtly reinforcing the changes I have made. And my children, now older and more aware, understand the value of patience, strategy, and quiet resilience. Looking back, I realize that true revenge is not about humiliation or anger. It is about transforming perception, demonstrating competence, and quietly reshaping the narrative. By the end of that vacation, by the time my family truly understood what had happened, the dynamic had shifted irreversibly. I had turned laughter into respect, doubt into acknowledgement, and dismissal into strategic influence. And even now, when we gather, I can see the remnants of that moment in my father's eyes, in my sister's cautious deference, in my mother's subtle nods of approval. The vacation, which had seemed ordinary on the surface, became the stage where I quietly reclaimed authority. And the echo of that reclamation continues to shape every interaction. In the quiet moments, I reflect on the power of patience, foresight, and subtlety. The most profound victories are often invisible, unspoken, and cumulative. By allowing my family to underestimate me, by preparing and executing with precision, and by maintaining dignity and control, I turned what could have been humiliation into long-lasting influence. The final realization is both simple and haunting. Those who dismiss you often provide the clearest roadmap for your eventual rise, and the satisfaction of their silent acknowledgement is a power far more enduring than any dramatic confrontation could ever provide. I remember the first morning after that vacation, waking up before everyone else, hearing the house stir, and realizing something had changed. My father, who had always been larger than life in our home, was now quieter, more measured, almost cautious around me. I poured myself coffee and watched him, through the kitchen doorway, as he moved about, trying to reassert himself but hesitating in ways he never had before. My sister, the eternal competitor, lingered nearby, pretending to read a newspaper, but I could feel her eyes constantly flicking toward me, calculating, wondering what I would do next. I smiled quietly to myself. This was the aftermath I had been waiting for. For years, I had let them underestimate me, let them believe that I was naive, compliant, and powerless. Every slight, every overlooked achievement, every sarcastic remark had been fuel for what I was building. I had learned to wait, to observe, to understand exactly where the fissures in their armor lay. And now, for the first time, those fissures were wide enough for me to step through. The week following the vacation was full of subtle power plays. I started with the smallest things: reminders about appointments, correcting errors in schedules, managing family finances quietly behind the scenes. My father would try to interject, asserting his usual authority, but I had already anticipated his objections. I had spreadsheets, emails, and documentation ready. Each time he attempted to challenge me, I presented calm, factual responses that left him with no room to argue. His frustration was palpable, but he could not voice it without appearing foolish in front of the rest of the family. My sister, on the other hand, tried her usual tactics, passive-aggressive comments, undermining suggestions, and subtle jabs. But I had anticipated every move. I let her think she was in control, carefully steering situations so that when she acted, she inadvertently followed the path I had already set. Her attempts to assert dominance only highlighted her lack of foresight, while I maintained the quiet, calculated authority I had been cultivating for months. By the second week, the real shift began. I started taking charge of family gatherings, proposing activities and outings with meticulous detail. My father attempted to override my plans, but each time I had already coordinated the logistics so perfectly that any interference would have caused chaos. My sister tried to create side plans, but I subtly integrated her ideas into the structure I had designed, making her believe she was contributing while the ultimate control remained with me. Every interaction reinforced the new hierarchy. I was no longer to be overlooked or dismissed. It was during a particularly tense family dinner that my strategy reached its apex. My father began criticizing minor details, the seating arrangements, the meal timing, the choice of entertainment. My sister chimed in with sarcastic remarks, expecting me to falter under pressure. But I remained calm, smiling politely, and then, in a quiet, deliberate tone, I said, "Let me handle this." I reorganized the table, coordinated the courses, and guided conversations in a way that made the evening flow seamlessly. The room fell silent, and for the first time, both my father and sister realized they were no longer in control. The subtle victory was intoxicating. The satisfaction of seeing years of underestimation finally pay off overwhelming. Over the next few months, the pattern solidified. I took charge of holiday planning, managing travel, and orchestrating family events with precision. My father, who had always been the loudest voice in the room, now consulted me on decisions he would have previously dictated unilaterally. My sister, initially resistant, began deferring to my judgment in subtle ways, recognizing that her attempts to dominate were met with quiet but undeniable competence. My mother, always the silent observer, watched with a knowing smile, acknowledging the shift without ever needing to voice it. The most profound moment came during a family reunion. My father attempted to assert his usual authority, giving instructions with the expectation of compliance. My sister tried to reclaim control through subtle manipulation, redirecting attention to her plans. I allowed them to act, observing, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment. Then I quietly interjected, offering solutions and guidance that resolved conflicts, coordinated activities, and ensured the event ran smoothly. By the end of the day, the room had collectively recognized my authority without anyone needing to admit it aloud. I had not humiliated them. I had simply demonstrated undeniable competence. In the weeks that followed, I began to notice a change in the way the family interacted with me. Conversations that had previously ignored my input now included me naturally. Decisions that had once bypassed me now required my perspective. My children, who had observed my quiet patience and strategic thinking, began to emulate the same approach, gaining confidence and agency in ways that mirrored my own journey. The family dynamic had irrevocably shifted, and I could feel the balance of power subtly but unmistakably in my favor. Despite the growing recognition of my capabilities, I maintained the facade of humility. I never gloated, never openly challenged their authority, and never allowed my triumphs to become the source of resentment. Instead, I let each success speak for itself, allowing the family to arrive at their own realization. I was no longer the overlooked, underestimated one. Every smile of acknowledgement, every subtle nod of deference, every moment of consultation reinforced the new order I had quietly established. One afternoon, my father pulled me aside. There was no anger in his voice, only a reluctant admiration. "You handled the reunion well," he said, his words deliberate and measured. "I did not expect it." I smiled, acknowledging the compliment without allowing it to feel like victory. "Thank you," I replied. "I just wanted things to go smoothly for everyone." His eyes lingered on me for a moment longer, and I could sense the unspoken acknowledgement. He recognized my skill, my strategy, and the shift in control. My sister, meanwhile, began adjusting her approach. She no longer attempted to undermine me openly. Instead, she tested boundaries subtly, seeking to gauge the extent of my influence. Each attempt only reinforced my preparedness. I anticipated her strategies, redirected her efforts, and ensured that the family cohesion remained intact. By guiding her actions subtly, I transformed potential conflict into collaboration, strengthening my position while maintaining harmony. As time passed, I continued to consolidate my influence, always balancing authority with discretion. I managed finances, coordinated events, and offered guidance on complex family matters, all while maintaining the appearance of quiet participation. My father, once domineering, now deferred to my judgment in ways both overt and subtle. My sister, still sharp and capable, learned to respect boundaries, recognizing that my competence was not a threat, but an established reality. Even my mother, who had always been the quiet mediator, acknowledged my role with subtle gestures of approval. The ultimate lesson I learned through this process was that true power does not require confrontation, loud declarations, or overt dominance. It is cultivated through patience, strategy, and the careful orchestration of events that reveal competence and command naturally. By allowing my family to underestimate me, by preparing meticulously, and by executing with precision, I had achieved a transformation that was both invisible and undeniable. The shift in dynamics was complete, and the recognition I received was earned through strategy, not spectacle. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that the most profound form of revenge is not destruction, humiliation, or anger. It is transformation. It is the subtle reordering of perception, the quiet assertion of capability, and the patient orchestration of outcomes that leave no room for dispute. By the end of that vacation and the months that followed, I had turned years of dismissal into long-lasting authority, reshaping family dynamics in a way that was permanent and undeniable. Even now, when I observe family gatherings, I see the traces of that transformation. My father approaches conversations with measured respect. My sister engages with careful consideration, and my mother acknowledges my presence with quiet approval. The subtle victories continue to ripple through every interaction, reinforcing the balance I quietly established. And in those moments of reflection, I understand the enduring truth: patience, strategy, and the silent accumulation of influence are far more powerful than any overt confrontation could ever be. The final haunting realization is simple: those who dismiss you, belittle you, and underestimate you provide the perfect blueprint for your rise. By studying their weaknesses, anticipating their actions, and executing with calm precision, you can achieve a level of authority and respect that cannot be challenged openly. And the quiet satisfaction of witnessing that, acknowledgement without confrontation, without spectacle, is a power that lingers long after the moment has passed, shaping every interaction, every decision, and every glance.